Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, an inspired conversation space between Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner on the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness.
We keep our conversations honest, our experiences real, and our philosophies exploratory. We believe that in order to raise incredible humans, we first have to raise ourselves. We know that in order to rock the family, you've got to nourish the mother. If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively, head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper. And for all live streamed pre-release podcasts and all our free content, head over to our free Facebook group, Nourishing the Mother with Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is what to do about your New Year slump. I don't know if you know this is a thing, but we're here to tell you it's a thing.
and to make it safe as well.
Yeah, and lots of people are going through it if that's where you find yourself right now. So the purpose of our conversation today is we do want to leave you with our tools, what we do and use, because Bridgie and I both go through a New Year slump every year on repeat. It's like rinse and repeat. Everyone back here again. And we really just want to talk around it so that we normalize where you find yourself, so you feel less isolated, less hopeless, and hopefully more aligned with who you are becoming this year. So that is the purpose of our guiding light in today's podcast.
Yeah, beautiful. I think a way to start this is also to look at how much is our slump, in reaction or response to the unrealistic projection of this idea of this brand new clean slate and this brand new year, and you're starting afresh, and all that fantasy kind of marketing speak that we're just so acculturated with at this time of year, and which we know, deep in our being, it's not possible because of our human nature and the way that we're so patterned to simply just, dust your hands of a year and say, great, thank God that year's over. Here's another one. And assume that you're going to start it with some kind of clean slate, right? Like we have this sense that it's a bit of a joke. And so we're bombarded with all of this information and this energy that kind of says you can be all this and do all this, but yet actually, we're kind of counteracting that by going, no, that's not actually reality, and that there's actually function here for me to, feel into what my slump is saying, feel into the conflicting, confusing emotions at this time of year, particularly this year after like a COVID Christmas and complex family dynamics and, being unable to travel or not having, time to or capacity to travel. So there's going to be a whole range of feelings as we turn over into a new year, right?
Yeah, totally. And I just think also we love Christmas time and all of the things and all of the celebrations and the catch-ups with friends. Like, we all love that. And it's exhausting.
Yeah.
So we also kind of are on this gravy train of like thing after thing after thing, and it's always like some sort of new nervous system kind of firing or ramp up. And then we just keep backing it up with the next one. And it doesn't really stop between Christmas and New Year, because if you are someone who has family events that sprawl out over several days, usually you're still doing Christmas type meals and preparations and cooking and all of the things in between that. Maybe you're going away or you're camping or staying with family, and still there's all of the shit you've got to organize and the mental load and the kids in a different environment.
Yeah.
And then we have New Year's Eve and there's usually a party or something. Like,
and it's late nights and crabby kids and
different diets, different routines. It's actually almost like coming down off a sugar high, and we kind of crash first before we build ourselves back up into something that's more nourishing and sustainable. So also just recognizing that whilst it's been fun and you said yes to all of those things, also there's a toll, and this is also the time just to rest and repair before you start berating yourself for whatever it is, your lack of vision, your lack of purpose, your lack of whatever the slump thing is that you're going through right now. Which brings us to our first point, Bridgie, which was the first one when you and I said, what do we want to share here? You said, first one's got to be go into it.
Yeah. And I was thinking of that in the context also of like when we were away, because we've just come back from camping, and this beautiful river that we stayed on, it had these, like you could tell exactly where the really deep parts were because the river was so much darker there. And I thought, what a beautiful metaphor for the fact that when you enter the depth and you're dark, you actually find more capacity, you find greater range, you find new discoveries, you find that you can access more, right? That this river has more variability, it has more landscape, it has more, temperature, right? That you didn't know was there unless you enter it, right? It becomes more wild to you and you become more part of it. And so what I love that kind of visualization for how we can traverse our own inner landscape and our own darkness, because it's so easy to judge ourselves or berate ourselves, or particularly, in the way that you might, to our listeners who value conscious parenting or your relationship, it's really easy to berate yourself if you speak in a tone you wouldn't usually speak to your child. And so you become like self-flagellating, and you focus instead on like beating yourself up instead of actually, well, no, like, why am I here? Like, what's the goal here? Is this a natural equilibrator? Is this the down that had to follow my up? Which is what you're talking about with the high of the Christmas and the high of the New Year. Like, what goes up must come down. And can I let it take me down and be safe here and make this okay? Or are my children's emotions in this place too much for me to bear, that I'm doing everything I can to claw myself out? And like I noticed that with myself today with my toddler, like she's hard to be around because I'm hard to be with too today. And so my practice today was, how can I soften into the hard bits I'm finding in her? Because really they're just the pathway back to the hard bits I'm finding in me that I don't want to be with. And so as soon as I surrender to that and I drop to the floor with her, or I enter the place she keeps bringing to me, or I, just whatever the dynamic is that I find myself wanting to get out of, when I go there, like the dark part of the river or like the depth I didn't want to go to, I find, oh, actually, it's not so scary here. I can be here. And then I find the spaciousness and I can come out the other side. And so I love that, for you, like, for what is here for you? For me, I go, well, I have unrealistic expectations of myself and my output right now. I have this sense that I'm going to click my fingers to be, inspired and lit up and know exactly what I'm doing. And so because I don't, I'm frustrated with myself and annoyed. I think that everybody should just pick up after themselves magically, and that just be something that they should just do, not a learned skill. So I'm getting pissed off at my own unrealistic expectations on my children, right? Pissed off at them for my unrealistic expectations.
No, I'm more smirking because I'm like, who can't relate to literally everything you say?
Yeah. So right, like, so how great is that you hear yourself in this, and I don't know others hear themselves in it too, because we need to speak about this, and when we speak about it, we make it okay.
Totally. Yeah. God, totally. I see. This is what happens. You do this, and I like become the listener, and I'm like, yeah, and then I forget.
You forget what
that's right. I have to navigate a conversation with you. Right, back on track. All right. I really loved your metaphor about the river. And are we talking about Tidal River?
Yeah. Yeah.
Such a magic river, that one, isn't it? Like, if you don't know Tidal River, then Google it, because the images are just magic. And should you ever have the opportunity to put your feet into it in Wilson's Prom, it is just magic, isn't it? I mean, the minerals that make that water so dark just feel beautiful. So I really loved your metaphor, because I mean, I've been going to Tidal River probably like you, Bridge, as most probably Victorians have since we were born, you know, like at various family trips, and it's always where you'd end up. So I just loved your metaphor so much about the depth. And I loved when you were talking about, you know, and then I sink to the floor, or in the case of your metaphor, I enter the deep. And then I realized it's not so scary here. Because I think what happens is you spend a lot of time flapping around in the shallows, looking at the deep, going, I'm not going there. And it's a whole lot of flapping over not a whole lot.
Yeah.
And I certainly notice that when I get into a slump, and I think also I would pin here, maybe revisit the Overwhelm podcast with Sharon Joy again, if this is you flapping, looking at the deep, that's when I recognize I can spiral. Like, I'm completely unproductive. I don't enter it. And in fact, I use my emotionality to avoid it.
What do you mean you use your emotionality to avoid it?
Because it's easier to flap, to be like a flapping hen.
Tears and make it a
drama. Yeah, and spin around in circles and, you know, splash around in the water, or think that I'm drowning when I can touch the sand on the ground, right? Like, we're following your metaphor. There's a whole lot of flapping. Not a lot of productivity or useful movement.
Yes.
Not a lot of energy conservation. So what I find interesting about it is it's a lot of energy going out at a time when energy reserves are generally low. So energy is incredibly sacred at these moments, right? Because we're talking about a slump. And yet we're expending so much flapping around, not taking the step into the dark water. Right?
Yes. And this is so potent for me, because I've been having so many conversations with my children about like their energy conservation in the water, and learning to tread water, and what that opens up once you learn to tread water. I love having these, like, pew, pew, pew.
So good, isn't it?
Yeah.
So good. So I recognize that's totally what I do. And for me, like you, Bridget, always starts with, am I inspired in my work? And I would love to think that, you know, I just cruise along. I've, like, you know, got my pulse on what I'm doing, and I just cruise along. No. Every year I go through this, and I get to it and I'm like, no, I'm cool. I know what I'm doing next year. And then January gets here and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know what I'm doing. What am I here for? What, you know, like, enter.
What do I know anyway?
What is my purpose? Like, every year. This is why I can laugh about it, because I can see it at the same time as I'm flapping. I'm watching myself flap, going, you know, you're flapping right now. Yeah. And luckily, you know, Nick and I have such a good dialogue on it now. He's so invested in my business journey now. I don't hide any of that from him. I'm like, as I'm flapping, I'm letting him witness my flapping. And he was so beautiful. The other day we were sitting down having a coffee, took me to my favorite coffee place. And he's like, listen, I think you just need a little reality check here. And he, you know, did his spiel, there's all this, and you're getting completely knotted up and just flagellating the shit out of yourself over this, like, little baby pinky over here. And I was like, yeah, I really needed that reality check. Because I was doing all this flapping. And then yesterday, so it was yesterday morning, then yesterday afternoon, I took my daughter to she wanted to buy some plants at the local nursery with her Christmas money. So I went there and I saw a potted Christmas tree, half price. And I was like, so for years I've been thinking, I'm going to buy a potted Christmas tree instead of buying one each year.
Mm.
So I thought, this is great. It's half price. It's perfect. Exactly the height I want. I'm going to get it. But that fucker was really spiky. And so getting it into the car, it gouged my left eye. So then I'm like one-eyed Pete the pirate, like, squinting as my eyes like pouring with water, and I haven't been able to open it for 36 hours. And so I'm lying there at night in pain with this eye that's been scratched. And you know how awful. And I mean, you have contact, so I'm sure I have nothing to complain about, but it is the most god-awful feeling, isn't it, when your eye is irritated and in pain constantly. And I was lying there going, oh, okay, universe, I have now closed my left eye, my feminine, right? Like, it is pouring with tears. Like, it literally won't stop. It's in pain. I can't even open it, which is like vision, insight.
The feminine is weeping.
Yeah. So I was like, it's enough. So today I sat in the dark, that you're talking about, which is what we're talking about here, to go into it. Okay, let's just feel it. What is actually here? Let's step it out instead of jumping. I've got to do all of the things, and then you hit overwhelm and you rebound into doing nothing again. Just gently, what's the main thing that's happening here? And which is kind of what I've been doing each time I've entered the conversation with Nick or with Kasha. Kasha and I walk every Monday and Friday morning at like 6. We go for like an hour's walk. So we always flesh, and I've been on repeat the same thing for like, I don't know, 4 weeks. So each time you do that, I think you flesh it out, which is why point number 2, and I'm going to combine these two together, is walk it out and talk it out. When you're in a slump like this, it's really important that you get your crew together, and your crew being the men and women and humans in your life that champion your journey, that understand the way that you see the world, parenting, work, whatever it is that you're flapping about right now, that they have a shared value or way of looking at the world. That's really important when you're asking yourself to dive into what's here and excavate, that you have the right voices around you, not the ones who can't see what you see. So get your crew together, move your body, talk it out. Talk therapy is great. Sometimes just talking it out loud to yourself is just as therapeutic, but walk and talk and feel it. What is here? What is actually, if I actually like flapped and got into the flapping, what am I flapping about? Like, anchor it down. What are the things? What's here? What is it calling me into facing? So go into it, walk it out and talk it out, get your crew together, because it may be something that you need several weeks to process, and that's okay.
And also too, I mean, on this point, I would touch on too that you've just also spent time with your immediate or extended family who've asked you what you do and what you're like, like what you're focusing on, and, has asked you, all of the stuff around what your life looks like. And for many of those people, they're not going to understand you, understand your values, or why what's important to you is important to you. And so if you're not aware of that, sometimes you can take on board other people's opinions or judgments, and in that process disconnect from what lights you up, or disconnect from the value of what you provide, or how you show up, or what you choose to focus your energy on, and you can get wobbly. So when you're saying, Julie, talking it out, who you choose to talk it out with is really important. I would suggest that your mother or your mother-in-law or Uncle Joe is not going to get it. It's not going to.
Some friends.
And even some friends, exactly. Even some friends are not going to be the reflection that you need.
100%. Yes. Thank you for honing in on that, because that's exactly what I'm saying, is choose who you talk about those things to wisely and carefully. Because you can love people, like you can love your friends, but they're not the people you're going to talk about that thing with.
Yeah. And that's discernment. It's just knowing when to open and who to open to. Exactly.
It's boundaried. Yeah, as opposed to just leaking it everywhere.
Yeah.
It's boundaried. So definitely I think those two things are really important, that you just recognize your flapping and work out what you need to anchor into what are the main points. Because generally when we're flapping, it's really not that big a deal. Like we make it a big deal, but at the end of the day, the thing is not that big of a deal. So just make sure you're really anchoring those down.
This podcast is brought to you by Honey Club and Reimagining Motherhood, your spaces for intimacy and feminine embodiment, and conscious parenting and inspiring motherhood. Come join us at julietanner.love and bridgetwood.life.
Then step number 3 is rest. I think we forget that rest is work too. Okay.
Yeah, expand on that a little, because I think it can be easy to forget the value of rest.
Yeah, I wish it wasn't, because it seems like an on-repeat conversation in our cultures and communities.
Yeah.
But I even recognize that, I don't know, myth of meritocracy or the patriarchal notions of hard work and hierarchy and, I don't know, all of the systems, that I can see them in my own narrative that happens in my own mind, which starts to make rest really challenging for me to choose, for me to say yes to, because those narratives exist within me as much as they exist outside of me. So unless I'm conscious of what those narratives are, and I'm consciously aware of how flawed they are and how true their opposite is, it's very easy to believe them. So if that's where you're at, is witnessing, I'll say, colonialized or patriarchal narratives in your own mind, then that is a magnificent place to start. If you can see that that exists within you as much as it exists outside of you, then I would say to you, where is the opposite equally true? Where can you see it to be true? Where have you known it to be true until you're like, oh yeah, that's right. That's right. It is better. My relationship is better when I rest. I'm a better parent when I rest. I look after my body better when I rest. I'm more connected to my body and my sexuality when I rest. Oh, that's right. I'm a better friend when I rest. Like, just remind yourself about how it makes you better, not worse. So that first. Then I would remind you that rest is work. I think we think when we're resting, we're not working. And I certainly know I fall into this regularly. So which is why it's always front of mind for me when I find myself flapping or slumping. I'm like, okay, where are you at with your rest? Because I know for me, it's a core pillar. Sleep, drink, eat well are core pillars for me whenever I'm slumping. You have to know what your core pillars are that you return to and that you're conscious of when things are getting harder. So one of those things for me is rest, because I can work like a slave, but I don't want to live like a slave, and I don't want to have the mindset of a slave either. Slave to my own master, you know, or society's master. So it's always the first thing that I go to is, where are you at with your rest? Where are you at with resting? What is your relationship to resting right now? How are you in loving rest right now? Like, imagining it's a human, right? How are you at being intimate with rest right now? How are you at, you know, like, where am I at with rest right now? And recognizing that when I'm resting is actually when I do my best work. But what happens is,
that flip.
Yeah, but what happens is I can go, oh, well, I've only got, and I imagine that it's true for other mothers in particular that have little people around them, is that my child free time is so small. And particularly over the last 2 years, because we've been in lockdown and had no babysitting at all, those periods are so small that I find myself cramming like the actual work into it. And then I'm cramming either side of that all of the, you know, life Inc., family Inc. stuff that I've got to get done. And so rest just goes way on the back burner. But what I know to be true is that when I prioritize rest as work, I am infinitely more inspired and better at what I do across the board. So the bullshit narratives that I carry about rest will be, like money, something that I think I will be forever kind of disassembling and nutting out in order to return to what is at best my greatest wholeness, which I think usually does come from rest. So I want you to remember, that was very long-winded, that rest is work too. When I'm resting, I'm actually working.
Mm.
And in fact, I would argue that I'm working more when I'm resting than when I'm actually physically working.
Because it's such a repattern for you, do you mean that that's why it's
yeah, because it's usually when I'm resting, it's when I'm going to be downloading, opening up my psychic connections, opening up my channeling, opening up my energy. Like when I'm resting, all of that comes just like whoosh, back. But when I'm working and I'm in doing mode, it's like that femme mask switch. When I'm doing, I'm in my mask, and I fully am, like with all of my work, totally am. But visioning, inspiration, energy, all of that stuff is hard to find in those places. So the rest is me working, as opposed to me going, okay, God, what am I doing? What's my plan? Where am I? When I rest, that just comes.
When you're resting is the portal.
Yeah, exactly. So remembering that rest is work too. And when you're in a slump, what is your relationship to rest right now? And working on that relationship.
And also, when it's interesting because when you're in a slump too, your self-worth is often lower. And so you'll think that you'll need to do more to build your self-worth, right? And so because your self-worth's low, then rest is not okay for you. So you actually avoid the very thing that's the very pathway to back to equilibrium or back to wholeness.
Yeah, totes. I love that you said
that because that's a loop I get into too. Like if I just do more or serve more, even from this place of depletion or like, slump,
I'll be better.
Like I'll somehow then be like worthy of like, whatever I've constructed, I'm worthy of based on that action, right? Like,
I just really love that you tied in that self-worth. You're right, because when we're slumping, our self-worth is equally plummeting because it kind of does that with our energy. And that's usually the time that we're going to cut ourselves way less slack.
Yeah.
And so rest will be less, even though it's the very thing that we need more of. I really love that you said that.
It's just powerful to link the two to then go, oh, actually, the very thing that I'm resisting now, because I know I'm in this narrative, is the thing that's going to get me out of it.
Yeah.
And it's also tied to, because the rest is also then tied to feeling into the depths as well, right? Because if you don't want to rest, you also don't want to feel. Because your resting will open you up to your feeling.
That's really true. Yeah, it's really true. So after you have done these things, gone into it and anchored what it is, walked it out and talked it out with your crew, rested and worked on your relationship to rest, then it's time to mind map and ask yourself continuously each time you finish one word before you mind map the next one, what do I want? What do I really want? What do I really want to be doing? What do I really want? Like, check out all of the rules. That's the question I ask myself continuously and all of the time. And I never make decisions until I have fully brain dumped. What do I actually want to do?
This is such a great question. And I don't know about you, but I see actually examples of, I see why now when I parent and I'm edgy, why it's so hard for me to answer this question. Because I don't think there was ever a lot of scope for what I really wanted as a child, right? So even as an adult, to truly answer this question without limitation is a stretching. So I also want to make space for that too, because it can be full of like trepidation sometimes to answer that very basic question, which we should really be just be able to answer. But instead, because we'll often have layers that all in the way of like you talk about the money blocks or the rest blocks, or whatever other blocks you've got are going to come up when you ask yourself this question: what do I really want? And if you can't answer what do I really want, then there's something in the way that says you can't have it.
Yeah, I totally, amen. Love all of that. I would also add that if what do I want feels too lofty or hard to tangibly touch into, then adding doing, what do I want to be doing, I think simplifies it. So I literally do this as a review. So what do I really want to, what do I just feel so good about? Like if I'm here to live my best life, not wait for retirement for this magic time when I'm like 75 or 80 to then do what I want. I don't want to do that. I want to live the life that I choose to live today. So therefore I know what my best life is right now, knowing, unfortunately, every year that changes.
Yeah.
It's not set in stone. But what do I want to be doing? Like, how do I actually want to be living? And when I know how I want to be living, what do I want to be doing that would feel so wonderful? And I just want to, like, I want to do that thing for work. And I just want to do that thing for my kids. And I just want to do that thing for or with my house and my partner. Or like, we can always come up with, what do I want to be doing? If what I have right now isn't what I want, which it isn't if you're slumpy and you're resentful or frustrated, you know what you don't want. Great.
And like, it's a good,
what do you want?
It's the whole thing, right? Because we're so much animal creatures, right? That we can spend so much of our time actually just moving away from pain, like just moving away from what we don't want. Yeah. And so this question is the question that pulls you towards your inspiration.
Yes.
But which you don't leave much room for if all you're doing is just in this hamster wheel of running away from pain, of running away from what you don't want.
I don't want this. I don't want this. I don't want this. And guess what? The law of manifestation. What are you continuously sending out there? I don't want this. I don't want this. I don't want this. Whatever you focus on grows. So if you're focusing on, I don't want this. I don't like this. I don't want this. I don't like this. Guess what you're getting more of?
This.
Yeah. Yeah. Because where attention goes, energy goes. So instead of that, I think it's wonderful to know what you don't want. Great. That's a whole lot of answers we can just sweep out of the way. Excellent. It's not any of those things. What's left? What's left? Because that, and this is the point of mind mapping too, is not to have one succinct answer, but just be willing to play. Be willing to just, I spent all day doing this. As I said to you, I gouged my eye yesterday and went, enough flopping, Julie. We're now at injury pain point. That's enough. Let's not wait for the sledgehammer.
Yeah.
So I spent all day today. I got nude and I sunbaked in my backyard on my lounger, and had my little toddler. Well, she's not a toddler, she's preschool, and now she's 4. I had her with me all day. And so she played day spas. So in between day spas and sunbaking and kind of, dozing a little bit, I come, maybe I could do that. And I'd throw that down on, I probably wrote 20 pages today of mind mapping. Not because any of it's any good in inverted commas or because I'm going to use any of it, but because I'm spitballing, how far can my brain go? What are all of the possibilities? What might, and then I go, but okay, cool, look at all of that. And I'm not even going to look at it until tomorrow. And then be like, okay, out of all of this, what is the gold that I'm keeping?
I love that.
Like, just don't even get sucked into it, Don't even get sucked. I mean, we have a little puppy at the moment, so we're housebound, which was great. And I knew our neighbours next door were out for the day, which is also how I could be nude, because otherwise we have holes in a fence because our kids go backwards and forwards. So nude in the backyard, my kids coming and going because Nick was out doing stuff with them at different times, but Gwen stayed with me all day. I still had a fantastic day of rest and of inspiration with a child. So don't go telling yourself those things are exclusive, because they are not. Is not my lived reality. I can't wait for when I have child-free time to get my needs met.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll be waiting forever.
Yeah.
And I'll be angry. Instead, what does that look like to do that together? So I just would say, please mind map, asking yourself continuously, what do I want to be doing? What would feel so good that it just like, it would feel so good to do. Money or anything doesn't matter because it just feels, it's light. I just want to do it. It lights me up. I want to say yes to that thing. What do I, like, that's how I look at my life. How do I want to be a yes to my parenting? And how do I want to be a yes to the school drives? And how do I want to be a yes to the work that I'm doing? It might be that the work I'm doing seems to be working great. Cool. But then do I want to still be doing it? Because if I'm not choosing it, if I'm not actively choosing it, it's a form of neglect and it will turn at some point, no different to the lover.
Yes, right.
Neglect. It's a type of abuse.
Well, if you don't, and also if you don't appreciate it, it's going to disappear.
Right.
And if you sit in resentment to it, it's also going to disappear.
Totally. Totally, right? So how powerful is it just to say, I get to choose this? What am I choosing?
Yeah. Or if I'm not changing this, I'm choosing it.
Totally.
As well.
Yeah.
So either how can I love what I'm choosing or how can I change it?
Totally.
Like, how can I love the school drop-off? Because that's probably not going to change. So how can I make that more pleasurable? How can I make that more joy-filled? How can I be inspired to do that?
Yeah. But I think also knowing you don't have to do anything. There's 1,000 ways, right? You don't have to do school drop if you really fucking hate it.
Yeah, it's true.
You don't have to do it. So don't be victim to the choice that you're making, is my point. You don't actually have to do anything because there is 1,000 ways to do any of those things that don't involve you doing it.
All of my best coaches have like turned on my head everything that I thought I had to do. And
exactly.
And I love working with clients for that very reason, because it's the same thing. Like we get so insular with our thinking because of the way our brains are wired. And so we have to ask these questions to, you know, blow our brains wide open, like you said. Right? Like to actually get beyond the looping, the stories we tell ourselves, the old narrative, the kind of like way that says, well, that's how it has to be done. No. There's a million roads that lead to Rome.
Yeah, there is. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. So do the thing because you choose it. There are many, many, many ways that you can do that thing. So the way that you're doing it is the way that you're choosing to do it. So make it inspiring. Is it something you genuinely want to be doing? And if it's not, change it. Everyone is going to fit in around you. I think we often get worried about change because we're worried about the impact it has on other people. But when you're inspired and lit up, other people just kind of, I don't know, flow into that. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. This is the way it's going.
Yeah, this is what we're doing now.
Yeah. So mind map the heck out of how big can the possibilities go? What are all of the possibilities for you? Not necessarily, they don't even have to be realistic. What are all of the possibilities for you? And then on another day, go through what you've got written down, clean it up. So really, I'm asking you to get clear on what are you changing? Where are you focusing your energy? And what are you manifesting and calling in? And when you know those things, by then, I promise you'll be inspired and out of your slump. But this is a really beautiful process. Go into it, walk it out, talk it out with your crew, rest, mind map, clean it up. 5 steps to get out of your slump, and you will be out of it on the other end of that.
Love it. So good.
So, Bridgie, how do we connect with you?
You can connect with me at bridgetwood.life. And I'm super excited because as we're talking about this coming out of a slump thing, I am about to launch a very limited mentorship for 3 months. It's called the Reimagining Motherhood Mentorship. So it's going to be limited to 5 to 8 women, and it's going to be across these areas of parenting, relationship, and business, and how you can tie them all together in a beautiful way and go beyond those places that you get stuck to see the synergy between those things. Because I don't know about you, Jules, but for so much of the past 6 years, or, you know, having babies and building business and showing up in the world in different ways, finding that sweet spot between how does my mothering serve my work in the world and how does my work in the world serve my mothering is what I continually come back to. And also my relationship, how can that thrive in this place too? Because so often I think we can end up neglecting one, and I don't feel like that it needs to be that way. And so I'm really this is kind of having a me in your pocket kind of experience. And so yeah, that's going to be kicking off in a couple of weeks. So you can find out more about that at my website, bridgetwood.life.
Sounds amazing.
And what about you, Jules?
Well, because I'm rejigging everything at the moment, I don't I had the idea that I would have this all sorted by somehow 1 January, as you were talking about at the start, would click over and I'd be like, kapow, I know what I'm doing. I don't. It's, been December was actually a really intense month and not quite as restful as I was thinking. And as I said to you, I've fluffed around. And so today's the first day that I've really let myself macerate in it. So there's a whole lot of change happening. I do still completely adore Queen's School and Sanctum and Lovers School. So they are coming up. Queen's School starts in Feb. But in terms of Wildflower and Honey Club, I am sitting with what is the best possible thing that I want to do in there that would feel lit up and inspired and be of the deepest service. And I'm not fully resolute on that yet. So I don't have anything to tell you about right now, but stay tuned because there will be very soon places and spaces to join at julietenner.love.
Beautiful. And I love that we've been walked through, that very live process for you of, bringing to consciousness what those things are.
Yeah. Yeah. Life is work, right? Work is life.
Yeah. Beautiful.
And you can connect with us at nourishingthemother.com.au, Nourishing the Mother on Facebook and Instagram. If you have a question, we would love to answer it. So please reach out. You can contact either Bridge or I, so bridgetwood.life, julietenner.love, or through Nourishing the Mother. And we would love to hear from you and answer your questions and direct the conversation where you need it to go.
We would. Remember to nourish the woman, to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
Thank you so much for listening. We literally couldn't do this without you. Please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
If you desire to integrate your learnings practically and supportively into your life, then head on over to bridgetwood.life or julietenner.love to go deeper.
And if you feel like giving back a little to this free content, please rate us on iTunes or Facebook, all of which helps the podcast reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.